It's 1763 in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. You are a candle maker. It's before the rooster, but you're already up. You have to be. You live above your shop in what was once a storage room. Now it's your bedroom, kitchen, everything. In one corner is a rickety cot. In the other, a wood stove with a blackened chimney above it. Beside that, a window with a shuttered glass pane. Beside that, a door. All three lead outside. At least there's a latch on it so your dog can get in and sleep in your bed. But the rooster isn't the only thing that's awake. A cat prowls on the windowsill, tail twitching, and the two of you exchange a look. You know it'll try to sneak in later for some warmth. Soon, the first pale light creeps over the horizon, and after a quick prayer, you rise. It's time to start the fire. You bring in 2 buckets of water from outside, one for drinking, one for the fire. Your job requires lots of hot water. You pour the water into the stove, poke the fire with a poker, shovel some ash into the water, and lay a few small sticks across the top. Tallow. That's what you'll make today. It's animal fat used to make candles. It's mostly from cattle, but sometimes from hogs or sheep. The fat has been saved and scraped from their hides after slaughter. The tallow comes from a butcher shop. In exchange, you give the man a few candles. He likes that. Most people do. Nothing much else goes into making candles besides some simple tools and maybe some cloths to wipe up spills. And you go through a lot of tallow, enough to fill several buckets every week. So you need a constant supply. The tallow sits in its bucket waiting. It's a thick paste, almost solid, but it smells sour, like old stew left too long in the summer sun. It needs to boil for a while to be usable, so you cover the pot with a lid and set it over the fire. Already you can see steam rising from the cracks around the chimney. Soon the tallow will melt into a thick, yellowish oil. The smoke from the chimney curls and drifts toward the ceiling. You hear a knock at the door. A neighbor. Maybe she wants some candles. Maybe she needs something fixed. She won't stick around to talk. You're busy. You're about to get busy. You poke the fire to keep it going. You stir the tallow with a wooden spoon. And even gloved, your hands still smell the sour stench. Your shirt is already soiled with grease, but you don't bother changing. What's the point? You work all day. You eat when you can. The hours are long. The tallow boils. Now it's hot enough. You take the pot off the fire and carefully begin to dip the wick strings into the hot tallow and lift them out to cool. This is the most important part. Each wick string has to be coated in wax, layer after layer. You dip and twirl the wicks. Dip and let them drip. Each candle takes dozens of dips. And you make many candles each day, enough to fill several small boxes. Outside, Boston Common bustles with activity. People, carts, and animals crowd the road. You think about heading down there after work, maybe having a drink at the tavern, or maybe you just head home, grab a crust of bread and some cheese and fall asleep. You think about the cat on the windowsill. It's getting bigger, bolder. One day it might just sneak in and curl up on your cot. You finish the last candle and put the pot back on the fire. There's always more tallow to melt, more candles to dip. It never ends. You're good at it now. Right, once you were taught how, you just repeated the process day after day, year after year. You don't think about it much. You just do it. It's in your bones. It's in your hands. And soon, it will be in your children's hands. Life isn't easy. It rarely gets better. But you know this work. You know it well. After a while, the ache in your arms doesn't seem to mind as much. You keep dipping. You keep filling the wick strings with wax until they're thick and strong. You make enough candles to last you a lifetime. You're good at this. You're very good. Before the midnight ride, before the lanterns in the steeple, Paul Revere was just another man with ink on his sleeves and silver dust in his hair. Imagine him in a modest Boston workshop, long before the revolution flared. The windows fogged with breath and metal filings. The soft rasp of engraving tools at work. This was his world. Not galloping horses and patriot cries, but craftsmanship, quiet, and responsibility. Revere was a silversmith by trade. Not a glamorous life, but a respected one. His days began early, often before sunrise, with coals being stoked and tools laid out in precise order. Silversmith's work required patience. You don't rush curves etched into spoons or initials hammered onto teapots. Every mistake was permanent and costly. He was skilled with engraving, often making not only jewelry and flatware, but items like eyeglass frames, surgical tools, and even intricate engravings for publications. One of his best-known prints, a dramatic depiction of the Boston Massacre, would come years later. But its detail, its polish, that all came from years of labor with burins and burnishers, and when the workday ended, it often didn't, because Revere was also a family man. He fathered 16 children. 16. Managing a household that large in colonial Boston meant constant motion, balancing bills, apprentices, orders, and illness. Some of his children helped in the workshop. Others simply added to the chorus of daily life, the crying, coughing clatter of early American survival. By candlelight, Revere wrote letters. He read. He met with fellow craftsmen, merchants, and later revolutionaries. But the base of it all was the workbench. He was part of a network of artisans, printers, smiths, bookbinders, men and women who built Boston's bones. It was this network, built in ink and silver and shared toil, that would later become the web of communication and resistance. Before the ride to Lexington, before the legend, there were years of steady work, steady hands, early mornings, and the constant clang of trade. This was Revere's life. Engraver, artisan, employer, father, and only later, a midnight rider. By now, you've smelled the tallow, felt the heat of the fire. But not all candles in colonial America were made of beef, fat, and soot. Some burned cleaner, brighter, and they came from the deep. This is the strange story of sperm whale oil, the quiet golden light that came from the ocean's most elusive giants. Imagine a candle that doesn't smoke much, that burns evenly, that gives off a warm, clear glow. That was the promise of spermaceti, a waxy substance harvested from the head cavity of sperm whales, but to get it, men had to sail thousands of miles to chase, harpoon, and harvest creatures that dwarfed their wooden ships. In the late 1700s, whaling was booming. Ships from Nantucket and New Bedford set out for years at a time. The voyages were long, dangerous, and often fruitless. But when they were successful, they brought back barrels of oil, the kind that changed how the wealthy lit their homes. Spermaceti was different from regular whale oil. It was less greasy, it smelled better, and it solidified into a hard white wax, perfect for premium candles. Making spermaceti candles was still labor-intensive. The raw oil had to be filtered, cooled, pressed, and refined, all before a single wick could be dipped. They were expensive, often too costly for working households. But in churches, state buildings, and the homes of the elite, they became a symbol of refinement. There were even rituals around light. In some homes, candles were lit and extinguished with special tools. Snuffers, scissors, wick trimmers, all part of the ceremony of illumination. Light wasn't taken for granted. It was precious, planned, controlled. And in a world without electricity, it defined your hours, your habits, even your sense of safety. So the next time you strike a match or flip a switch, imagine this instead: a whale deep beneath the waves. Its oil harvested, boiled, strained, and shaped into a single flickering light, carried across oceans, burned to illuminate a single colonial evening. Now let's step away from the soot and smoke, away from the workshop's heat and clamor, and into a quieter world, more refined, but no less bound by candles. Imagine yourself in a colonial parlor. The wood-paneled walls are warm with light afternoon light. A small fire crackles in the hearth. The air smells faintly of bayberry and lavender. And in the center of the room, wax candles flicker inside brass holders, casting long shadows on embroidered curtains and polished wainscoting. This is a lady's world. It's a space for visiting, sewing, writing letters, and very often for gossip. Candles here were not utilitarian. They were a symbol. More refined the wax, beeswax or bayberry, the higher your status. The more you could afford to burn candles in daylight, the more you signaled ease and wealth. They were arranged with care, trimmed precisely, stored in locked cabinets. A burned-down stub meant money lost and attention paid. In the evenings, women might gather for card games or quiet conversations, and by candlelight, everything softened. Voices, glances, worries. But life here wasn't all leisure. There were rules. etiquette so detailed it could fill volumes. When to stand, what to say, how many candles to light for a proper guest, how not to spill wax on the polished floor. The parlor wasn't just a room, it was a stage. And the candles, its lighting crew. For the elite, illumination was a matter of elegance and performance. But for everyone else, it remained labor, tallow, and cost. Even in silence, the candle told a story of class, of comfort, and of control over the darkness. The candlemaker's greatest tool was also their greatest threat. In a world built of wood, with thatched roofs, dry beams, and drafty walls, fire was never far from disaster. And in a candle shop, where open flames were needed to melt fat, boil oils, and heat molds, the risk was constant. Imagine a single spark landing on a plank floor, soaked with grease, a loose sleeve brushing the lip of a flame, a wind through the shutters that turns a flicker into an inferno. No alarms, no hoses, no insurance. Fires moved fast, faster than you could shout for help. A blaze might eat through the shop in minutes, spreading through the rafters and into neighboring homes. You could lose everything: tools, stock, ledgers, years of labor. And if the fire jumped to a customer's property, you might face lawsuits, exile, or ruin. Most candle makers kept water nearby, sand buckets, fire blankets, if they could afford them. Like placing bevels in front of a river, some workshops burned in silence. Others lit up the night sky. Entire streets were razed in cities like Boston and Philadelphia, fires spreading through trade districts, taking families and fortunes with them, and even if the fire spared you, the smoke never did. Day after day, workers breathed in a slow fog of soot and fumes. Their lungs grew heavy, their skin dry, their eyes stung red from the smoke. It wasn't sudden, but it was steady. And over years, it took its toll. So when you next light a candle, pause for just a moment. Think of the hands that shaped it, the heat they stood over, the ever-present fear that one wrong moment could burn everything down. Now, step into stillness. The heavy doors of a colonial meeting house creak open. Wooden pews line the dim interior. The air is cool, faintly dusty. And above all, quiet. And in that quiet, one light flickers. A candle, short, thick, and slow burning, rests on a brass stand near the pulpit. It's not just for light, it's for presence, reverence, a visible marker of the sacred. In colonial America, candles were deeply tied to ritual and religion. In Puritan New England, services often took place in daylight, not out of preference, but because candlelight was precious. Evening sermons were rare, and when they occurred, lighting the church was no small task. Dozens of candles had to be trimmed, arranged, and spaced to avoid fire. Smoke was inevitable. Wax dripped on wooden floors. Every light burned money and melted slowly with each passing hymn. For more ornate churches, especially Anglican ones, candlelight played an even grander role. Chandeliers, iron, wood, or brass, held rings of candles above the congregation. Each flame carefully lit by hand with long tapers, each wick trimmed mid-sermon to keep the smoke down. The candles themselves were sometimes donated, a gift of faith from local families. They might be made from cleaner beeswax, scented faintly with herbs, stamped with initials or a verse. And beyond the walls of the church, candlelight followed sacred moments, a vigil at a sick bed, a birth attended quietly by midwives in a low-lit room, a funeral, the casket lit by flickering flames as neighbors sang or prayed. In each case, light wasn't just functional, it was symbolic, stood for life, hope, and the delicate line between day and night, body and soul. So even as candles filled workbenches and parlors, they also lit the most sacred corners of colonial life, steady, silent, and solemn. If tallow was the workhorse of the colonial world, smoky, greasy, ever-present, then bayberry was its delicate cousin, subtle, seasonal, special. Imagine stepping into a kitchen where something fresh and herbal simmers on the fire. Not soup, not stew, but wax, drawn from the pale green berries of the bayberry shrub. It takes 15 pounds of berries to make just 1 pound of wax. The berries were boiled in large kettles until the fragrant wax floated to the surface. Then it was skimmed, cooled, and shaped into candles that burned brighter, cleaner, and most memorably, sweeter. The scent of bayberry was soft like spice and wood smoke with a sharp, clean edge. It clung to hands and coats. It scented parlors for hours. These candles became holiday staples. Burned at Christmas time. Gifted, prized. They were also seen as good luck. To burn a bayberry candle down to its base on New Year's Eve, without letting it sputter out, was thought to bring wealth and health in the year ahead. But bayberry wax was rare. You couldn't buy it at every shop. It wasn't for everyday use. It was often blended with tallow to stretch its scent further. And because it took so much labor to extract, it remained a candle for the careful and the fortunate. So while most homes relied on smoky tallow tapers, a few, on special nights, glowed with greenish bayberry light. A candle that didn't just illuminate, it celebrated. Not every candle maker was a grown man with a soot-blackened apron. Some were boys, barely tall enough to see over the workbench. Their job? Everything. And nothing glamorous. Imagine waking at dawn, not to go to school or play, but to sweep the floors of a tallow-slick shop. The air smells of smoke and grease. Your first task, hauling water, then fetching firewood, then stirring the cooling wax, slowly, carefully, with a stick that scalds your palms if you're not quick enough. In Colonial Boston, trades were learned through apprenticeship. Children, some as young as 8 or 9, were bound to masters, living under their roofs, eating at their tables, and working for years with no pay but the promise of eventual skill you were expected to obey. To watch, to wait. Maybe one day you'd dip the candles yourself. But until then, it was ash collection, wick cutting, and fat rendering. A task so pungent and unpleasant, it was often done outdoors, no matter the weather. Discipline was strict. Mistakes meant stern words, or worse. Candle ruined wasn't just wax lost. It was time, firewood, tallow. All gone. But for some, apprenticeship was a path to independence. If you lasted through years of repetition, heat, and labor, you could eventually open your own shop, hire apprentices of your own. Pass down your tools, your secrets. But still most never made it that far. They left the trade, took other work, or stayed as assistants. The rhythm of the trade never stopped. One generation of tired hands training the next. So when you picture a candle flickering quietly in a window, remember the boy behind it, covered in ash. Ouch. Waiting for his chance to light the world. And now, the last candle burns low. You've stirred the tallow, poured the wax, watched it cool and curl and harden again and again. You've seen what it means to live by firelight, to fear it. You've walked through workshops, parlors, churches, and ships, smelled the bayberry, heard the soft hiss of whale oil catching flame, watched apprentices grow tired in the glow of work that never quite ends. This was a world built on quiet labor. On early mornings and late evenings, on the delicate line between light and dark. So as your own room grows still, and the hum of the day fades into hush, let your mind wander back to those flickering candles, to the hands that made them, to the softness of a single flame in a cold wooden room. You're not in the workshop now. You're here, at rest. And the night waits gently for your dreams to arrive. Sleep well.